So real quick before this video begins, I just want to point out that there will be spoilers pertaining to the HBO Game of Thrones show and the A Song of Ice and Fire novels as well. So if you haven't caught up on those and you don't want to hear spoilers, proceed with caution into this video.
Are you ready?
So welcome to another episode of Table Troop Talk. My name is Rob and I'm here with Brett.
Hey!
Today we're going to be talking about the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, which is brought to you by CMON, or for those of you not in the know, Cool Mini or Not games. So it's interesting because, well, like a lot of kind of indie games nowadays, it starts with Kickstarter. So a little bit of history about the game. Started with a Kickstarter for Starks and Lannisters box set, which you can now buy as a starter set. However, the game has expanded quite a bit. They got Night Watch, Free Folk, and recently they just came out with Baratheons and Targaryens on top of a kind of general neutral.
Yeah, there's a neutral faction. It's not necessarily a cohesive faction. There's just a whole bunch of different units that could go in armies with each other, but are applicable to they can be taken in every army except the Free Folk.
Yeah, and actually kind of we'll be talking a little bit about kind of like the releases and building your army and stuff, but the neutral is definitely kind of a unique thing out of it. But it's got kind of the major players of the shows and the books. For those of you who are familiar with A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, the show on HBO. So I guess we're going to start talking about some gameplay. So for those of you who have played miniature war games before, a lot of the basic stuff will be kind of familiar. But what's really interesting about this game is probably the most important choice you have is who leads your armies.
Right. Your commander and your commander's, the buffs he gives to the unit he's embedded in, all of that really matters. Like, for example, my first army was Free Folk, and Mance Raider as commander provided a wonderful morale bonus, which was the number one weakness of the Free Folk aside from not having armor. Anytime I didn't take Mance, I suffered.
Right, and it's not as quite as black and white as that. It's not like you don't take Mance, you die. But your gameplay changes quite a bit. Like, I think we learned kind of a lot of that. We ended up playing, 3-4 games today?
Yep.
We played quite a bit, and when I first picked up the box, I was playing a lot of Robb Stark as my leader. Like, on paper, it sounded like, oh, cool, he's got all these kind of, like, maneuverability, and, he can withdraw, he's kind of got this guerrilla warfare thing, but I couldn't quite play him well enough, so I got beat quite a bit, but I played Great John Umber today, and he really pulled through. Unfortunately, Stannis, which was your commander choice, he was kind of the perfect counter to that, because, and that's kind of the crazy thing too, is just like if you picked Renly over Stannis in that game,
I probably would have
you would have got raffle stomped. So basically, Great John as a commander, I think he gives a unit vulnerable and panic tokens. We'll talk a little bit about that. But Stannis' whole counter thing is he can't give the unities in token.
When whatever unit Stannis is embedded in, no matter what it is, it cannot get panic, vulnerable, or weakened tokens. You can't get tokens at all.
Yeah, so normally, even just your commander, what unit they're in, can change everything. And, Mance was one example of he can kind of affect more. Mm-hmm. Right, Renly is someone that can affect more with kind of morale buffs.
Yeah, Renly and Mance had similar buffs to morale, where I think it's the same for both of them. There was a morale bonus to any panic tests made within long range of either Mance or Renly.
Right. So, for those of you who aren't super familiar with like wargaming and stuff, really the kind of too long didn't read here is just whoever you pick to lead your army is going to change the gameplay, and I really don't think we can go any further in this conversation without talking about the tactics deck.
Right.
Which is also kind of another heart and soul thing. So I believe your factions tactic deck is always going to be 14 of the 20 cards are always going to be the same. So if you're Starks, you're always going to get the same 14 cards. Your Lannisters, your Free Folk, it's always going to be the same 14 cards. But then also what it gets even crazier with the commander choice is not only are you like, oh man, what buff does he bring to this unit? You're like, what can he do in the cards?
Right, yeah. Every commander has, I think, six.
Six. Two of each. So really three different cards.
Yeah, 3 separate tactic cards, 2 of each. And those can really... without the tactics deck, it would be a pretty, straightforward, kind of cut and dry kind of game.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, and it's so good. So even like in this kind of like makes really the armies different is this tactics deck, right? Mm-hmm. Like if this didn't exist, yeah, it would kind of all just be stats, but the fact of the matter is there's these cards that do all these different things. So I guess we can kind of talk about what these decks do. Mm-hmm. So they play to the army's strengths and weaknesses. So I think the one that's most unique for me were the Lannister deck. I finally got a chance to play my Lannisters. I got the Stark and Lannister starter set for Christmas, and I've mostly been playing Starks, but I got to play a couple games as Lannisters. And man, they have some really cool things.
Yeah, like when we first started playing, you were playing Starks, I was playing Lannisters, and as you got to experience today, when the tactics cards for the Mountain as commander can be truly horrifying to the other player.
Right, and I think actually it was really interesting because you still, again, like it's just so cool, and I know we're definitely off a high of playing, the 3-4 games that were all awesome. They were so much fun. Because it still had the Lannister tricks. Like, for example, you had, who was your NCU who could do the switcheroonies?
That was Alistair Florent.
So, also to even go even further, like, about just the gameplay about this, there's also NCUs, like, we're probably sounding pretty scatterbrained right now, but it's...
NCUs are non-combat units. You have your game board or your mat or whatever you're playing on that has your army on it, but then you also have the tactics board. It's this little card with, I forget exactly how many...
And by a card, it's not like a Magic the Gathering size card. It's a pretty big card, like probably about the size of a tissue box.
Yeah, so it's like a double or triple wide like index card. And there are like, I forget exactly how many, 5 or 6 positions on it.
No, 5. Anyways, doesn't matter.
Yeah. And what you do is you have a non-combat unit, which is just a character. In my case, with my Baratheons, I have the option of Shira Errol or Alistair Florent. For Rob, he had Cersei Lannister and Tyrion. And you would place your non-combat unit at a position, and when you take that position, you would have an effect you could then undertake that would affect the actual fighting.
So like one example is if you put an NCU on the symbol that's a horse, you can get a free movement.
Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of different stuff. Like all these positions have their own effect you can bust out, and then some characters you can either take a position, do that effect, or they have their own effect that you can choose to do instead.
Right, and like it's just incredible because then also between the cards, your commander, like just some of the stuff you can do on that is pretty powerful. So also another thing to mention about the game is it's alternating activation. So it's not like I'm going to just use Warhammer as an example where it's I do my turn, you do your turn kind of thing. It's I'm moving a dude or I'm moving an NCU to claim a thing on the tactics board. It's, and then it's one thing, you do another thing, you do one thing, you do another thing.
Yeah. And
you can activate once everyone around. But when this tactics board is activated, you can do like all sorts of really like kind of crazy things like, man, there's that center objective that gives you an extra objective point. I got first turn. I'm going to take the horse, and then my next activation I'm going to march.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, a unit that has 5 movement all of a sudden has 15. Which is great. And
it can really, you can really, it's such a huge part of your strategy, like you have, okay, one, like a third of your strategy is what are you going to do on the table itself, what units are going to charge, who's going to attack what, but then you've got, and then your tactics deck, what are you going to do to supplement this, attack or this movement, and then your tactics board, what are you going to do to affect the overall thing going on. Like, it's a very, everything together is just, demands a strategy.
Like, and that's just the one thing I compliment the people who sat down and made this game, is it feels so thematic in what the IP is all about, right? Like, just even the last game I was thinking about, like, I picture, who are your NCUs again?
Shira Errol and Alistair Florent.
So, like, I was picturing, Cersei, she's constantly just making her guys nervous. She's making guys run away. But Alistair Florent, he knows that Cersei's strength, so he can actually, like, block her and counterplot. And we're constantly just counterplotting against each other on top of this battle that's going on and all that. And it just feels so damn thematic. And I think that's why this hits me in all the right places, right? So, yeah, is there anything else on gameplay you want to talk about?
Just the fact that in general, the whole way the game plays, the rules, everything, as with any miniatures war game, it takes time to learn, but it is a very easy pickup compared to, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, whatever. I would compare it in terms of ease of learning to, like, Kings of War.
Right, like, it's, yeah, like, when I literally got this box, I'm pretty sure you were with us. We just opened it and said, you want to give this a go? And you said yes.
Yeah,
and by, like, second game, we were pretty much flowing.
Yeah.
And I think that really says something about the good part. Because there's a lot of flow. There's not a lot of times we're looking through rules.
Right.
Because it's all in just a lot of cool game aids to just help you as well. But we'll kind of get to that. So yeah, picking a commander, picking your NCUs, like counter-plotting on top of navigating. Like, it's funny because I feel like we didn't even talk about the actual battles yet.
Yeah,
exactly. What I mean? Like, it's all about talking about the counter-plot, the building the army, and all that stuff.
Yeah, like, this is one of the only games that I've found that really has that two sides to the thing. You have, your men on the ground, your guys, slogging it uphill under a rain of arrows and, getting in close and locking it in with the enemy. And then you have the political, bulldoggery that goes on behind the scenes. If you're familiar with the Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like, we're like, oh, this is our war game, but this is all the stuff that happens outside of the battle, because it's like, I'm assuming people who know how it works, but also, you do have, everything's on movement trays, everything is about 12 wounds, as in you gotta deal 12 damage to a unit to pretty much wipe it out, and each unit has its own unique stats, and also, those choices matter, and usually, games are played at 30 points, 40 points, I think is considered the standard, but obviously, if you're big into, bigger battles and stuff like that, they actually do have ways for you to scale it. So, I've seen people online being like, this is our 130 point battle, and I'm like, yes. This is what I want.
Yeah, and again, that's definitely something that, actually, I think we were talking about that earlier today, like, just how cool would it be to just, throw together this huge monstrous battle. Like, we could carry off, the Siege of King's Landing that never happened.
And I guess, like, the differences in the armies, right? So Starks play they're very punchy. They don't really do too much of the tactic stuff. They're all about maneuverability and just striking hard. Lannisters aren't so much about doing that. Like, they can do that. You got the Mountains Men, which is one of my favorite units in the game.
Yeah, and like when we first started playing, I was playing, exclusively as Lannisters at that point, and I just, loved the Mountains Men. And especially with the tactics cards of the Mountain, it was just, I would come up against a unit and I would just...
They'd be gone.
Steamroll them.
They'd be gone. And then, Free Folk, they're the very kind of hoardy, outnumbery kind of army. And then Baratheons, which we had the chance to play, they're one of the newest armies, is they're very slow and tanky, but they can pack a punch. I have to say, our last game, when it literally came down to the wire, we were playing, I think, a mission called Fire and Blood, which is basically just murder as many dudes as you can. Pick a couple guys who want to die more, and then kill everyone else.
Yep. Because I had Renly stuck in with my Sentinels, and I massacred your Halberdier unit.
Yeah, Night's Watch, I'm pretty sure, are like the super, super elite combat army.
Right, yeah.
And Targaryens are all cavalry as of right now.
As of right now, yep.
Yeah, and so that's differences, and just there's a lot of cool choices for each army, and that's kind of our overview, our very scatterbrained overview of just like all this stuff going on. But yeah, if you're a fan of traditional war games, this will be very familiar to you. If you're familiar with board games, I don't think it's going to be super alien to you.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't be too much of a stretch.
Like, I actually ended up playing one game with Nicole, and she played the Lannisters, and she actually picked it up pretty quick because of kind of the tactics boards is a bit more board gamey, and it's not super rules crunch heavy. Let me check my 3 different codex's rule books. It's kind of all written for you. Yeah. And I think actually one thing that we will talk about in gameplay is just this game can be primarily run through an app.
Right, yeah, there's an app called War Council that has literally everything on it, and when there was a recent update to the game, the app was our go-to.
Yeah.
It was like a lot of things changed. I think the way they did panic tests had very much changed from the previous versions now. And we didn't have to worry about going out and buying another book. We literally just had to go into the app and be like, oh, all right, documents.
Yeah, and I will say it kind of sucks because I'm not sure how too much stuff has changed, but a lot of the game also comes with aids. It comes with cards to help you be able to know stuff, but a lot of that stuff's out of date now. Yeah. So that kind of stinks. But personally, I rather check rules on my phone, because aids are nice, but they take up a lot of space on the table.
Right, definitely.
All right, so we're gonna go from gameplay to kind of the presentation of the game.
Right.
So, what is your opinion on just the visuals of everything outside the miniatures?
The visuals of everything outside the miniatures? Well, every single unit card, every tactics card, well, actually not so much the tactics cards, but all the unit cards have, art for the unit. Every character has, art on their card, and just in general, even on just the boxes everything comes in, the artwork is amazing.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm looking at the box up kind of on my my stack of bins here, is that it just looks nice. The game it tells you everything about it. A Song of Ice and Fire. You got Robb Stark about to stick a sword in Jaime's face, and Jaime's gonna put his sword in Robb Stark's head, and there's all this other stuff. But yeah, no, and it's always cool because it's based on the books, not the show.
Right.
So you're not going to have your Amelia Clarks, your Kit Haringtons, kind of thing. So if you're familiar with that and you kind of see the actors as that, it's really cool. I always like artist interpretations on characters for books.
Definitely.
One of my favorite things about, buying a new Lord of the Rings game is always kind of whoever the artist is, to see their perspective on certain characters, because it can be like, oh, that's actually kind of a cool take on the character. Right. And we were talking about actually the depiction of Ramsay Snow.
Yeah, today, so there's 2 pieces of art for Ramsay Snow. There's the the way he is illustrated on the box that he comes in, which is very scraggly, scruffy. His face kind of looks like he got his ass handed to him by a childhood case of the chicken pox. But, yeah, and it's very dirty and very gruff, very rugged. But then you look at the art on his card, and he's, he has no hair on his face. His face is kind of fat. He's got a smashed in nose, and he just looks so creepy. You just look at the card, and you're like, just looking at this card is uncomfortable. And I think that's perfect because Ramsay Snow is possibly one of the most hated literary characters ever because he is just such a terrifyingly awful individual.
Yeah, and just I really like kind of the depictions. The unit cards have what they need. They have a pretty good picture of that. If you're looking for a paint guide, you can usually use the card as a reference for whatever unit you want to paint. And just I don't know. I just think everything's pretty visually clear. Nothing's really kind of confusing. The game presents itself very nice.
Yep.
I think. So now we're going to talk about maybe the part we're going to rant about the most.
Oh, yes.
Is the miniature quality. So I've had a chance to paint about 21 points worth of Starks at this point, and I'm working on my house, Umber Berserkers, which are pretty cool. But you've had the chance to kind of paint 2 armies at this point.
Right. So, my first army that I acquired were Free Folk, and the Free Folk are all wearing furs, and they have, weapons made out of bone and stone. There's very little metal. And the key to
hang
all
on.
of these...
So I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think one thing we need to point out is I think one of the things we should mention that if this is going to be a big pro or con for individuals picking up is there's no building required.
Right. These models all come precast. Like, you have a unit, you have, for example, you have a unit of Free Folk Raiders. You have 3 separate sculpts of Raiders. Some units might have 4 separate sculpts, and you'll have, 4 of each sculpt making up your unit of 12 or whatever.
Right.
But it's all,
pre-built and color-coded.
Pre-built and color-coded. An important thing to these models also is they are, 32 millimeter scale?
Oh, yeah, 32 millimeter. So they're a little bit bigger than your standard stuff.
Yeah, so, and it's good in the fact that some of your really small details are just a little bigger, so they're just that much easier to pick out. But at the same time, these models are also not overly detailed. They have enough detail to do service, to do justice to, what the model's supposed to be, and that's it.
Right, and, I think for those of them who I'll air quote are into the hobby of things, and I'm looking at kind of, I guess I'm looking at the Warhammer, the Kings of War, groups, that cut them off sprues, you build it, you can kind of customize it. There's really no customizing in this game.
Unless a model breaks and, you're going to funkify it when you fix it.
Right, and I've had maybe a sword break on me.
Yeah, I think I had a single spear and a single hammer.
Yeah,
on me so far.
And one thing I will say about the miniature quality too, and I don't know if anyone can 100% confirm it or deny this, they've actually been increasing the quality of miniatures as time has gone on. I think the Tully Cavaliers are all unique sculpts.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because it's only 4
and and I think somebody said one of the new units, I can't remember, they actually had 5 unique different sculpts or something like that, or maybe 4 plus the banner.
Oh, right.
So I think there is some increase to it as this game kind of picks up traction. Anyways, now we can talk about the joy of painting all these guys.
Yeah, so I had when I had first decided I was going to play Free Folk, because that was the army that appealed to me the most out of the ones that at the time were released, I had gone online and I had found a video of a guy who painted his models all with inks and washes, and that worked very well for the Free Folk army because there's very little metal. It's all cloth, leather, fur, fleshy kind of things, and where my strengths are more dry brushing than anything else, that really catered to my abilities. And my Free Folk army is not completely painted, but it was still a blast because I tried out a million new things and figured out 100 new things that I could do.
Yeah, and I think actually, talking about you painting your stuff differently is these sculpts and these miniatures for each army are very, very different, considering it's all kind of medieval knights, right? Mm-hmm. Is you can easily tell the difference between a Stark Sworn Sword and a Lannister Guardsman versus a Baratheon Sentinel. Like, it all looks very kind of unique. The Starks got kind of the cool, like, Anglo-Saxon,
right.
Norseman look. The Lannisters got kind of more of the standard, I guess more advanced, like the more knightly looking guys.
Yeah, they have the more, professional men-at-arms look.
Right, and Baratheons, they got that cool kind of, almost like Crusader helmet deal kind of going.
Yeah, they're kind of like the most knightly in appearance. At the same time, their most basic unit, is wrapped up in plate armor, chainmail, scale mail, has a hammer and a shield. Mm-hmm. That and the Baratheons are all armed with hammers, so there's no missing that, oh, hey, that's a Baratheon.
Yeah, like they got a hammer.
Yeah.
They got a hammer. It's a Baratheon. So, yeah, like, it's all just so well done. And I have to say, these might have been the most fun I've had painting miniatures in literally maybe since I came back to the hobby. Mm-hmm. A few years ago. And yeah, it's just, I constantly can't wait for more, and it's just, there's so many cool things to talk about, right? And there's variety in all the armies, you got berserkers and, these burly men. I got knights, I got tullies, Lannisters got mountain men, they got halberdiers, they got literal pyromancers,
And then, the Baratheons, they have, everyone's armed with a hammer. And then,
they don't really have any differences yet. Yeah. It's pretty much all the same.
There's not a lot of units for the Baratheons now, but there's, we've been hearing rumors about stuff to come. And then, you look at
the free folk too.
There's giants. Yeah. The free folk have giants. And they're scary.
Yeah, and then also just one more thing to talk about miniature qualities is the characters.
Yes.
Pretty much everyone's here for the most part.
Yep.
The
only ones we don't have yet are ones where their factions just don't have a release.
Right, and the point in the story is right at Robert Baratheon's death. So
right, the only
spoiler.
Yeah, so like the only the unifying point is the death of Robert Baratheon. That's where the game canon and the book canon, coincide. After the death of Robert Baratheon, the game is just, all right, players.
Yeah, so if you're a Stark fan, you can play with Eddard Stark, and he's awesome, and I recommend it. He's a good commander, but he's also a great NCU too, so I recommend that. So yeah, like, who's been your favorite character to kind of paint, or just what's your favorite sculpt, I guess?
My favorite character sculpt so far, I'm really not sure I could state a favorite.
Maybe pick a three. A favorite
three. I actually am very fond of Renly Baratheon. His model is very simple, but very fun to paint. Because, with his green armor and the way I did his green armor. And then Lady Val, I actually enjoyed very much. I think I put her through paint removal twice because I wasn't 100% satisfied with how she looked, and after the last time, she came out perfect.
Yeah, I think personally for me, I enjoyed painting Robb Stark the most. He was definitely the most complex. He has a lot going on, but he's a great model. He's a great sculpt. He looks he definitely looks noble compared to the other gritty Northmen. So I guess we're just going to talk about our overall experience with the game, our, what we like, what we dislike. So, I guess actually first thing we should talk about. The value of this game is so off the charts. Yes. If anyone was remotely interested in ever getting into a miniature war game ever, I am 100% recommending this for the value alone.
I am seconding that recommendation.
And here's why. So the smallest point game is a 30-point game, right?
Yep.
That's the universal.
That's what comes in a starter box.
And again, we're gonna pick on Warhammer as kind of Games Workshop enthusiasts. Warhammer 40K. How much do you need to buy to have 1,000 points, which I guess is considered kind of the lowest? If you're not playing in the current game, you're not playing Death Guard, you're not playing Space Marines. How much money do you have to spend to play 1,000 points?
Like most of your starter sets were like, what, $90, $95, depending upon where you went. Mm-hmm. And you would still have to go buy an extra couple units.
Yeah, probably.
Just to like even out the units you have, not even before you get to 1,000 points.
Right, and then you got to buy codexes, you got to buy the rule book. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where it is. So to buy a not Stark or Lannister army, you are spending what? $85 on a starter set. Now, what comes in that?
So you get several character options for commanders. You get several NCU options. You get usually like what? Four combat
so I think
units?
It's 4 combat units, 2 NCUs, and you usually get
2 combat characters. Potential commanders.
Yeah, you get two potential commanders, and you usually get attachments, which are actually something we didn't talk about, which are basically kind of like little unit buffers.
Unit bosses. But after all of that, you get all your cards, you get faction dice, you get
a rule book, the entire
rule book, you get a measuring unit that is, catered to your faction, like it's stylized for your faction. You get a whole metric ton of tokens that you need to play the game. There's just so much extra that's necessary, and it even comes with
all the terrain.
With all the terrain, it's
all the tokens,
it's all the flat 1D terrain.
So what we're saying is, you literally need to spend $85, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and you can just play this game.
Yeah, and
I've not found a unit yet. Single units on their own in their own little box is $35 retail.
And it's so honestly, we talk about 85. Yes, that can play the game, and that's true. If you're just your friends are really into it, and you're like, oh, I want to get in on this action. You can be very happy with your $85. Probably what you'll want to do is buy a hero box and at least one other unit in your army, and that brings you to 40 points, which is the tournament level. In fact, even if we can backtrack, the box comes with more than 30 points. You actually have to make choices to cut it down to 30 points.
Right, yeah.
And that's the great thing. The Baratheon, I think, using just about everything is... Yeah,
using everything.
It's probably 33, 34 points.
Yeah, it's 33, 34 points if I were to slap everything together.
Right, so, it's just tremendous value, and that's just something I cannot stress enough. Even people who have never played a war game, who've always looked at my miniatures and kind of scoffed at it, especially because Game of Thrones was also a very popular TV show. I'm just almost like, why not? Right. Why not? You can spend $25 more dollars on a PS4 game, an Xbox One game, or you can give this a shot. You don't even have to paint anything.
Right.
You don't have to do anything, and we can just have fun and roll dice. And I think that is the first thing that is just so important to talk about. The one thing that does kind of stink, though, is if you do want to play Starks and Lannister, you have to buy the heavy starter box.
Right.
Which I think runs...
was $175?
Yeah, $175, which is pretty steep on its own. But, you get
2 full armies.
You get 2 full armies.
And all the extra stuff that comes with an army, they both have their own separate extra stuff.
Right. So that's kind of the big stinker, and I don't think there's any plans of them separating that yet. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe somebody else might know. But if you want to play those armies, you do have to buy in the big thing. But even then, you can get it online for as cheap as $120. If you're going to go half-seas with a friend, you can totally do that.
You're spending $60 each.
Which is,
and if you're getting it on eBay or something, you're spending 40, maybe 50.
Yeah, and even if you split it at full retail, it's still about $85, right?
Yeah.
You're spending, or no, it's a little cheaper than that, right? 85? I don't know.
Yeah, math.
Math isn't our best part, even though we play a game with dice and numbers. So I guess this is going to be kind of our review section. What do you love about this game, and what don't you like about this game?
Myself, especially where I came from, Games Workshop games where you didn't have to use movement trays. I'm still adjusting to the movement tray thing, which is less of a con for me and more of a I just need to adjust to this. I mean, the pros, I could go on and on. Like the models,
right.
I love the models. The game is easy to pick up. I'm playing the faction that always appealed to me the most out of the whole shit and shebang. And I love the craftsmanship of the entire thing.
Right. So I'm going to start with my number one con, and it's annoying. So we talk about how beautiful these models are. We set these battlefields up, and the only terrain available, unless you're paying an arm and a leg for the Kickstarter stuff, is you get these little kind of shitty cardboard flat
1D
things.
terrain. Yeah, it's literally like, here's the borders of the terrain. This is what the terrain's supposed to look like, and yippee-ki-yay, go for it. And it's you have all these awesome models on the table, whether you painted them or not, doesn't matter. They look great, and then the terrain, is so lackluster. It's like, ew.
Right, and obviously you can make your own terrain if you're crafty. I've made like a wall, which is that. But I would really like them to just come out with just a terrain thing. Like, I'll buy it. I also kind of I'm not a big fan of the terrain rules, to be honest. And this is kind of more nitpicking than this is more of a subjective. This is my opinion.
Right.
Is I do not like the rules for terrain. I don't like how it's set up, but I'm not a tournament player. When we sit down and play, we think, what's a cool looking battlefield?
Right.
What's going to be an interesting challenge? So today we wanted to use some really cool MDF terrain I got from TT Combat.
Yeah.
And to build this kind of like little village, and we're going to have this scrum in the middle of a village kind of thing, but there's no rules. We're just like, I guess it's line of sight blocking terrain. And that's not necessarily how the game's supposed to be played. But again, I don't like using the cardboard terrain. And I think I'd be more open to using the regular terrain if, it looked nice.
Right.
So that's kind of my major con with the game. And, I mean, you don't really have any other things you think could be better. I think also the other thing that I do find kind of annoying, and it's not super big deal, and again, this is more leaned towards people who are competitive, because I guess there's a pretty good tournament scene for this game, and I think CMON wants to make this, the most healthy tournament scene possible, but when we learned the game, they changed the rules quite a bit. Morale changed, a lot of cards and stuff changed, so like I said, like a lot of our game aids just became useless.
Yeah.
And it's a little annoying, when you're like, oh, cool, you get used to this, and then you, like, check your units, and you're like, oh, I guess this doesn't do it. Which is why I switched the app. And again, that's more of a nitpick thing, because I just use the app, and that is kind of what just made me use the app. And
I'm not as pigeonholed to the app now, because my army was the second to last one most recently released, so...
And I do think... This is also kind of another con, and I think this is a bit more of a legit con, is I'm not really a huge fan of how they do these releases. And there is kind of a hole they can plug. So, for example, we'll go to your Baratheons. You can't buy another unit for this army until March 31st, I believe.
Right, and which is why I'm looking at some of the neutral units to fill in, where I'm weak.
But it also sucks if, say, for example, our friend wanted to be like, oh, I want to play Targaryens, and it's like, cool, and they're like, I want to upgrade to 40 points. It's like, well, you can't
Yep.
Or you can take Boltons, and they're like, oh, I don't want to. Then it's like,
right,
then they're stuck.
That just looks ridiculous on the table.
Yeah, like, I kind of wish, at least if they release it, they should release the individual unit boxes, at least that
like,
already exist.
Yeah, at least, like, quickly after, or reasonably timed after.
But of course, kind of the Band-Aid on the scenario is the fact that neutral units exist.
Right. And this is also a very small company, right? Or they just don't have the resources as yet dedicated to this that...
I'm not actually sure about the size of CMON. Obviously, it's not at the level of Games Workshop where they can release a new model every 3 seconds. But... yeah, I kind of wish they at least put so you can, if you wanted to upgrade and you didn't want to, you didn't want to play neutrals, you could just be like, I want to just buy another Stag Knights.
Right.
And that's the problem solved. But you can buy neutrals. You are going to be limited though, because you can add flayed men, but only half your army can be that. So after that, you can only spend 6 points on neutral units, and that is as high as your Baratheons can go.
Right.
Which kind of stinks.
Yeah.
So, but again, like, I don't know. That's also kind of a weird thing, because as much as we talk about the pros and all that, there definitely are some downsides too. And it's like, I can't even imagine the poor free folk players when they were excited when it came out, and they can't even take neutral. So it's like, that's what you get. Enjoy.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm not sure if that's more of a, kind of they don't have the resources to kind of do it, or if they just kind of maybe try to force people to buy more starter sets.
Right.
But, so I guess this is more of a word for warning. If you're playing to play the newest army, you might want to just, like, take a moment to think about if you want to play those bigger epic games already, that you might want to put them on the back burner and play, your Starks, your Lannisters, your Night's Watch, or your Free Folk. Alright, so sorry, we had some audio issues, but, yeah, as we were saying, if you're playing to play bigger games, just maybe pick some of the older armies as well. So I guess the last thing to talk about is how do you feel about replayability? How long do you think we're going to play this game? Is this a honeymoon phase, or?
I think this is going to be an ongoing thing, at least for a while. Mm-hmm. I foresee us still playing this, by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I'll be 100% biased here. So back in the day, my game was Warhammer Fantasy. Like, that was my game. I feel like every gamer of any sort, they just play that game and they're like, this is my shit, and it will be my shit until I die. Mm-hmm. Sadly, fantasy died.
Yep.
And I lost my shit. However, with that said, this might be my new favorite game. This might be it. I will live, breathe, and sleep it. And I've never really said this before, but hell, I'm even thinking about maybe going to a tournament or two, because I want to see what crazy stuff people are doing with their armies.
Agreed on all accounts.
And, like, yeah, it's... Man, and again, this is me wearing the nostalgia hat. Like, I miss the rank and file fantasy. I miss, picturing, what, as you call it, the honest warfare, just thematically, versus, Tau fighting Imperial Guard, where they're, 72 inches away and they're just shooting each other, and kind of that happens. But, yeah, it's... This might be my favorite game, and I'm going to keep playing it. I'm going to keep expanding on the Starks and Lannisters, and anytime I really think about going in, because there's just so many good games too. Like, recently I feel like I've just had a renaissance of my tabletop gaming again, being introduced to Scythe by Nicole, just really being like, opening up to that. We just played Gloomhaven a couple weeks ago, which I'm also just super into. But man, it's like anytime my mind goes, it always comes back to this game. And, I still want to play Kings of War, a lot of the 40k stuff still looks cool, and they're just churning stuff out, but that's kind of another story for another time. I really want to do, the Parabellum Conquest. That game looks
amazing.
The miniatures for that look so good, but it's like, when I have my my card out to go buy something online, I'm like, oh, but I could really use some Umber Great Axes. I really need Tywin for my Lannisters.
Yep.
And I think that says something to the game that I'm always wanting to come back. And I think also, one benefit of just this having a really popular IP attached to it is we are very motivated to almost make our own story out of it, right?
And that's something that I've been, spitballing in conversation constantly. Like, once you maybe get a couple other people in, we can create some kind of, campaign where it's like, okay, for sake of argument, you're playing Starks, our friend Billy might play Lannister, and I'm playing Baratheon. We get someone else who's playing something else. And, we rewrite the War of the Five Kings.
Yeah, and again, just even on that, that's just such a motivating factor. And again, going back to the value of this game, it's like, I want to play every army. I want to see all the hootenanny they can do. And it's, again, recommend.
Heavily recommend.
If you're into board games, give it a try. If you're into A Song of Ice and Fire and you never played a game like this before, if you have a buddy, give it a try. If you're a war gamer who's interested in wargaming, probably my must-buy game. I will 100% navigate you to this game. Alright, anything else to talk about in that regard?
No, then maybe we can spend some time just talking about everyone's favorite subject of factions.
Yeah, I know, right? So, do we know for a fact who's coming next? So right now, if you haven't been following along, the current playable factions are Starks, Lannisters, Free Folk, Night's Watch, Baratheon, Targaryens, and then you have, air quotes, neutrals, which you can play to the theme of Boltons and Stormcrows, right?
Yep. I have been seeing a lot of stuff for the Bloody Mummers, otherwise known as the Brave Companions.
So I don't know if what's rumored and what's confirmed. I guess we should say this.
The Stormcrows are confirmed. I think they've actually technically been released at the precise moment. Good luck getting your hands on them because everyone's...
Yeah, actually, that's another con about this game is... But again, I don't know if it's a resource thing. I don't know if it's a, scarcity, profit-turning thing. But just sometimes you can't find this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of annoying. Like, everywhere sold... Like, literally, I called one of my local game stores to see if they had Umber Great Axes, and the guy laughed. He literally laughed, and he's like, I have been trying to get this unit for so long. And then I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to go get Tully Cavaliers. Everything's sold out. So right now, I kind of feel like, maybe to my advantage, I can't buy anything for my Starks.
Right. Yeah, so for neutral factions, we have Bolton. They've already, pretty much most of that stuff's already been released. Stormcrows just got released. Stormcrow Mercenaries. This I'm gonna currently attribute to still being rumor. The Bloody Mummers, otherwise known as the Brave Companions. I've seen their unit cards online, but that's it. I haven't really seen much in the way of models.
Yeah, and sometimes people make fan-made stuff, so again, like
usually you can pick out what's fan-made and what's not, but not always. As for, and I know the Baratheons have some stuff coming. There's not a lot of information on it at the moment, but I've heard that Greyjoys might be...
I've been hearing Greyjoys are going to be February, and one thing that seems to be a theme is they kind of release stuff in twos, and I'm hearing, again, this is around the grapevine, the next faction that might be paired with them are Martells.
Martells, yep.
And then I'm not really sure where they go for that. We've kind of joked and hollered about the others being a potential army, which would be pretty interesting. It'd be pretty unique.
Yeah, people who know me know that I have a little bit of an issue with army jumping, and I'm very happy at this moment with my Baratheons, but I'm telling you right now, if the others in the Army of the Dead become a thing, I will immediately jump on board with that.
Yeah, and actually, to back up, one thing that's also kind of interesting about this game, because people will be like, oh, it's, can you do, the House Tyrell? It's like, well, some of the lesser houses are kind of combined with other ones. So
Right, like House Umber, House Tully are with the Starks.
right, you can still make entire army lists based around Tully's numbers, but you're always going to be the Starks when you are them.
Right, because rumor mill currently has it that House Tyrell will have units released for the Renly loyalty section of the Baratheon.
So Baratheons are actually kind of interesting, and they actually might kind of low-key kind of be more of kind of that two armies in one, because right. you cannot have Stanley Stanley Baratheon,
yeah, you can't,
Renly and Stannis.
You can't have Renly and Stannis in the same army because there are opposing king. Renly is the king in Highgarden, Stannis is the king in the Narrow Sea. A lot of the up-and-coming units will have, a loyalty attribute, and it will state whether they are loyal to Renly or Stannis, and if, they release, Highgarden Knights or whatever, they will probably say loyal to Renly, meaning you absolutely can't take them in a Stannis army.
Right, so what we're theorizing, and again, not sure how much is confirmed, denied, this is speculation, that when you pick Renly, you got your neutral Baratheon units. There's probably going to be, 4? Because we know mounted stag knights are coming.
Yeah.
But then, they could be, the more unique stuff is Renly takes Tyrell guys, right? And then Stannis takes, what are they called? The weird fire religion.
Red priests or something.
Yeah, more of kind of like the religious kind of diversion. So I think that's pretty interesting. And it is kind of cool. And this game does actually encourage theming as well, because one thing to going back to the Starks is, you can also play a House Reed army, which I forget what the trackers... Cranogman trackers. Like, I was just dicking around, just Helen Reed as my commander, and just, taking trackers and having Mira and doing all these like hit and run guerrilla stuff, and it's cool, and it really encourages theming. So, but I think a lot of different houses are going to be kind of crunched into it, so we're not exactly sure how many, I guess, houses with tactics decks are going to be coming out. We know that Greyjoys are probably coming, Martells are probably going to be coming at some point in time. Outside of that, not 100% sure what else is happening, but no doubt that there's going to be just more coming.
If I can spitball for a moment.
Tinfoil hats.
In reference to the Targaryens. So you have the Targaryen starter, which is Jorah Mormont, Daenerys Targaryen, and Khal Drogo. I wouldn't be surprised if, as just another option, or as something similar to the Baratheons with Stannis opposed to Renly, I wonder if we will have young Griff as a Targaryen option, where young Griff is supposedly Rhaegar's actual firstborn son, not getting killed by the Mountain and
I definitely need to go back and record a spoiler warning here, because we probably should do that in case, some people might have not read the books. I never finished the show because the show got really weird after a while. But, and then even talking about Targaryens, that kind of diversion, there's going to be Dothraki, and then there's going to be kind of Unsullied. Or you can do a mix, or you can pick one or the other kind of thing.
Right.
Which, really, really cool. So the future of this game looks very bright. I'm looking forward. I'm pretty much keeping up on as much as I can because I'm that into it. There's a fantastic Facebook group that's very, very active and just...
Very active, very helpful. Yeah.
So, it's... The future of this game looks bright. Doesn't look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. So I guess we'll kind of wrap this up. So, what's going to be next? What do you think is going to be the next purchase?
For me, probably Bolton Flayed Men, because I have no other Baratheon options, and I need something that can move, and Bolton Flayed Men can both move, terrify, and just stompy stomp. Also because I have it, on the very back burner to eventually have a House Bolton army because House Bolton.
Yeah, and the Bolton stuff is actually pretty sweet. They're terrible people.
Yeah, they're
and I feel dirty every time I play. I need to take a shower and burn my clothes.
They're horrific, dreadful people, but on the same token, like
at the same time, like
when you see that flayed man banner, you're just like, oh shit.
Yeah, and just like even after playing Lannisters, I'm like, ooh, I want to do an army that's all based on panic and fear. So I'm like looking at Bolton stuff. I'm like, damn, that would work.
You cringe, whereas I go, yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny because when we recorded this, it was originally going to be part of a segment for a bigger show, but we've just got so involved with this game, like it's like a full-time thing. So I don't know. How would you feel about maybe doing, a full-time Song of Ice and Fire miniature thing? You think enough happens?
I think so.
Yeah, that'd be great. So anyways, if anyone has any questions, any comments, leave a comment below. We're still new to this. If there's any recommendations or anything you guys want us to talk about, or if you want to drop us an email, we are rollforattention@tabletroop.com. And we will read your email or your question on the show. And other than that, happy gaming, and everyone have a good week.
Adios.